medical marijuana in the Philippines. I was pretty surprised to learn there's this whole debate happening right now over there about legalizing it for medical use. To really understand what's going on right now, we got to rewind a little, go back in time because the Philippines actually has a history of having, really strict drug laws. And as it stands right now, marijuana is actually classified as an illegal substance under this law, Republic Act now, 9165. It's called the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, and we're talking serious penalties here. Like if you're caught with it, or you're caught growing it, you could be facing life in prison, or even the death penalty. See, it's no joke. But here's the thing: even with this history of being really strict about drugs, there's this growing movement of people who are saying, "Hey, we need to change this," and are advocating for legalizing medical marijuana. In fact, there have been a few bills proposed in both House of Representatives and the Senate that are aiming to do just that, to make it legal for doctors to actually prescribe marijuana to their patients, but only for specific conditions where traditional treatments just aren't cutting it. Things like cooked it, chronic pain that's just debilitating, or severe epilepsy, or even like insomnia that just won't quit. These situations where people are really suffering. So you might be wondering, why is there this push to legalize medical marijuana? But what are the arguments that are driving this movement? Well, one of the big ones, and you hear this a lot, is this idea of compassionate care. The people who are advocating for medical marijuana, they really believe that it's eugenibum, a natural alternative for patients who haven't found relief through any other means. And they often point to, other countries where it's already legal. And they talk about how it's helped countless people manage, some really, really tough symptoms. But the debate goes beyond just this idea of compassionate care. There's also a strong economic argument being made. The people who support legalization, they think it could be a huge win for the Philippines, like they're talking about, potentially generating billions in tax revenue for the government. They often use the example Colorado in the U.S., which has brought in over $1 billion in cannabis taxes since they legalized it back in 2014. That's a lot of money. And supporters say, that money could be used for healthcare, education, infrastructure, you name it. So, okay, we've got compassionate care and economic benefits. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, that's so fast because there's another side to this whole story. There are people in the Philippines who are really against legalizing medical marijuana, and they're very vocal about it. And they bring up some valid concerns. And one of the biggest worries is the potential for abuse. Yeah, you have more people have access to marijuana. They worry that it could lead to more people using it recreationally, especially young people. And that could lead to addiction and all sorts of other social problems. Another point that people bring up who are against legalization because we need more research. They argue that we don't fully understand the long-term effects of using marijuana. And they're saying, hey, we need to be careful here. We need more studies, more data before we make such a big change. It's kind of a better safe than sorry approach. Now, it's important to note that the Philippines isn't just, jumping into this blindly. They're actually taking a really close look at how other countries have handled marijuana legalization, especially the United States. They're studying the regulations, the safeguards that are in place, the successes, the failures, all the lessons that have been learned along the way. It's like they're trying to create a playbook for themselves, drawing on the experiences of others. And it's not just policymakers who are involved in this debate. There are actual people, real organizations on the ground who are fighting passionately for what they believe in. One of the most prominent groups is the Philippine Cannabis Compassionate Society, or PCCS for short. They're advocating for safe and accessible medical marijuana. And they have a ton of members, somewhere between 70,000 and 80,000 people. So it's a lot of voices calling for change. Another group that's pushing for legalization is the Philippine Society of a Cannabinoid Medicine. And they're really focusing on the potential for the Philippines to actually produce medical marijuana locally. Their argument is, why import something that's expensive when you could grow it right there in the Philippines and make it much more affordable for the people who need it, which is a pretty compelling point. And then there are specific lawmakers who are actively working to try to reform the laws around medical marijuana. For example, there's Representative Antonio Albano, who has been working on a bill called the Philippine Medical Cannabis Compassionate Act. And this bill is all about making sure that patients have the right to access medical marijuana as a compassionate alternative if other treatments just aren't working for them. Then there's Representative Robert Barbers. He's been pretty vocal about this issue too, and he's actually the chairperson of the House Committee on Dangerous Drugs. So, his perspective is definitely important here. He's been really pushing for a bill that would actually remove cannabis from the list of illegal drugs completely. And his reasoning is kind of interesting. He points out, like, in the Philippines, they allow the production and sale of terms, things like alcohol, cigarettes, even sugary drinks, all of which can cause some pretty serious health problems. But they allow it, primarily because of the tax revenue that those products generate. So he's basically saying, why not apply that same logic to cannabis, especially if it can be used in it for medical purposes? And it's not just the House of Representatives either. The Senate's getting involved too. Senator Robin Padilla. He's filed a bill that actually has the support of both the Philippine Cannabis Compassionate Society and the Philippine Society of Cannabinoid Medicine. And his bill is focused on legalizing medical marijuana, and making sure any tax revenue that's generated from it goes directly back to the government. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. It's aimed at helping patients while also giving the economy a boost. And speaking of economic benefits, that's definitely a major factor in this whole debate. Senator Padilla's supporters, they often bring up the success that Colorado has had. Like we talked about earlier, they've seen over $1 billion in tax revenue from cannabis since 2014. And Padilla's supporters are saying, if the Philippines legalizes medical marijuana and they set up a smart tax system, they could see a similar influx of cash. And then the question becomes, okay, where does all that money go? Well, supporters say it could be used to fund all sorts of important things: healthcare, education, research. The possibilities are kind of endless. So it's like they're saying, legalizing medical marijuana could be a win-win. It could help patients, and it could give the government more resources to deal with other pressing needs. Now let's step back for a second and think about the bigger picture here. What's happening in the Philippines right now is about more than just medical marijuana. It's about challenging these really deeply ingrained beliefs and attitudes. The Philippines has a long history of having really strict drug laws. And there's a real stigma associated with marijuana use. So this whole push for legalization is kind of like pushing against an entire cultural paradigm. So they're trying to shift a whole mindset, which is definitely no easy task. But even with those challenges, the movement to legalize medical marijuana seems to be gaining traction. More and more Filipinos are starting to share their personal experiences with marijuana and how it's helped them manage chronic pain, cope with anxiety, even find relief from some really debilitating conditions. Yeah, and these personal stories are really powerful. And they're starting to have a real impact on public perception. It's like people are starting to see beyond the stereotypes and the propaganda, and they're realizing that this is about real people, real honest, and the right to access treatments that could potentially be life-changing. As those stories get shared, the signal around marijuana starts to fade a little bit, and the conversation around it becomes a little more honest. You may be thinking, haven't we heard this story before? And you wouldn't be wrong. This debate about marijuana legalization is happening all over the world right now, and a lot of the arguments are the same. But what makes the Philippines so interesting is that they're at this real turning point. They're looking at what other countries have done. They're weighing the pros and cons, and they're having this very public, very passionate conversation on what the future of cannabis should look like in their country. And this isn't just some abstract policy discussion, happening in the halls of government. This is a conversation. It's happening at all levels of society, from lawmakers and doctors to everyday Filipinos. And the outcome of this debate could not only reshape healthcare in the Philippines, but it could also transform the country's cultural landscape and really redefine its relationship with a plant that's been, demonized for decades. There are no easy answers here. There are valid points on both sides, and the stakes are high. But one thing is clear: the Philippines is at the forefront of this global movement. That's challenging our understanding of marijuana, exploring its potential benefits, and rethinking its place in society. This whole conversation is really forcing people to confront their preconceived notions about marijuana. It's making them look beyond the stereotypes and the propaganda and really consider the science, the personal stories, the potential impact on society as a whole. It's like this debate. You're shaking at their entire worldview, a human question. Everything they thought they knew. For the Philippines, this debate, it goes way beyond just medical marijuana. It's about personal freedom, individual rights, and the role of the government in people's lives. It's about whether they're going to hold on to these outdated beliefs or embrace a more progressive and compassionate approach to healthcare. And the outcome of this whole debate is going to have ripple effects far beyond the Philippines. It could inspire other countries in the region to rethink their own stance on marijuana. And that could be too a whole wave of legal reform across Southeast Asia. It's like the Philippines is in a position to become a real trailblazer